Welcome back to HardEdge. This is part 2 of the tutorial for creating custom menu entries in Unreal Engine with C++. In this video, we are going to continue where we left off and take our main menu bar, extend it with a submenu, which is something we've already done in part 1, and allow us to populate that submenu with editor utility widgets that we can then click and they will run. So how this is going to work is, ideally, you've already got the first part of the project done. Otherwise, go look at that first, and then we can continue. And to have an idea of the bones of the project, we can go into project settings, and I can show you how we will achieve this by creating our own custom INI file. Now, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the sort of uDeveloper settings class, which allows us to build the custom INI files. We'll talk a little bit about the capabilities of the class and how it works, and also how you, if you're sort of new to doing C++, can actually take a look at the source code and try and find your way around it. You'll notice that inside my project settings, I can scroll down here and find my editor utility widget menu. And you can see that this is pretty much what we have on the main menu. We will have the editor utility widgets, which is the sort of title for what we've built. And then in here, we've already have the tool. We have a widget label of what it's called, and then we also have a widget tooltip. It is a tool to speed up view mode switching in the editor. This is a tool that I have built, and it's really, really useful. It allows us to sort of switch between scenes and things very, very quickly, which for me has been very, very useful in a multitude of situations. So that's what we're going to do today. And the first thing we need to do is to create this uDeveloper settings class. The uDeveloper settings class will allow us to effectively generate our own custom INI file. And this will let us have a lot of flexibility and, more importantly, allow folks like designers, tech artists, and other people on the project who are potentially not able to do the C++ side of things, a way to expand upon our tools without us having to be consulted. They can just add a new entry and it will show up in here. And that's exactly what we want. You build a tool, others can expand upon it. You don't really need to do anything else. So as this is the other project that I built as a reference point for myself and to demo this for you right now before we got started, I'm going to close it because we don't need it. And if you'll recall from the previous tutorial, which hopefully you followed along with, we created a blank C++ project called My Custom Menu, and we did a custom editor submodule that is specific only to the editor, which means it has no runtime code. It's only for editor things. And this is the sort of guts of the project. We have this adding of the menu that happens with the startup of the module, and we call this function here, which then builds the menu that we require. So why would we want to do this? Well, oftentimes when I'm working on a project, I find that folks keep trying to look for their tools by searching for them manually, and they never know where they live. And in general, it's quite a clunky thing. Your tools should be accessible and really easy to find. They should be easy to use and easy to find. And for that, we build a menu. A menu has subcategories. You can organize that very easily. And effectively, after that, we don't have any issues. Folks can use the tools and everyone's happy. Let's begin by creating our own child class of uDeveloper settings. This should be fairly straightforward for us to do. Let's go into the public folder of our editor submodule. Let's create a new folder. I'm going to call this the widget menu settings. I'd like to keep things clean and separate, so we're going to add a new Unreal class. The class is going to be of uDeveloper settings, and you'll see that we cannot find it. If we search for classes here, we won't be able to find it. So we have to go to all classes and go uDeveloper settings, which this means it's selected. You don't have to click it. It is already selected. And what we're going to call it is our editor utility menu settings, because this is exactly what it is. We want to add a bunch of editor utilities to this menu, and in order for that menu to be populated, we need to have its sort of settings set up. We're going to hit OK, and as you'll see, it'll add to the public and the private directories exactly where I'd like them inside of our submodule. Now, we need to talk about the uDeveloper settings class and what it is and what it does. In a nutshell, the uDeveloper settings is a really easy way for us to create project-wide configurations. This can be for game settings, or in this particular instance for us, tool options and settings. I've created them multiple times to, for example, help me with content browser filtering, tagging assets, and just having sort of a central location that has data that is useful. It just allows you to do that in a really, really easy and quick way. The first thing we have to do when we look at this class is we need to tell Unreal that this can store data in an INI file. And for that, we need to use a specifier. And the specifier is config. So we're going to do config equals editor. Writer's being very useful and very helpful and helping me do that as well. Now, it's trying to autocomplete a bunch of stuff, but I don't need it to do that. For now, what I'd like to do is to also say that this is a default configuration. So if I call it default config, you'll see it says default config like so. Save the object configuration only to default INI files. So this means it's never going to make any local files for us. So we'll do default config. If I show you the other project configuration folder, so the other project was called HEDev or hard-edge-dev. If I show you inside the config folder, you have the default editor INI, and if we open this with Notepad++, what you have is exactly this. You can see here, script, HEEditor, editor utility, menu settings, which is what we are about to create. You can see a category tooltip, and then you can see a list of entries inside that submenu, which if you remember, was only one. This is exactly what it will build. And so when we talk about it being a default configuration, this is what I mean. It is inside a actual default config file that comes with the engine. If you didn't put that specifier on, it would create its own file, so it would be separate from this. In my case, I left it as default because I want it to be inside the default editor INI. That's what that specifier is telling Unreal to do. The next specifiers that I want to do is things such as a display name, but these are meta specifiers. So we have to start with meta, and you can see here that it already is auto-completing for us, even though I haven't told it what to do. In this case, this will be our editor utility widget menu. And we could call it the custom menu, or we could say, you know, whatever it makes sense for you, like your game, you know, whatever your game is called. In this case, I could call HEEditor, you know, utility widgets or something. And this should be easy to find. It's going to be stored, I think, alphabetically. So if you put this on just like this with editor utility widgets, it'll live exactly above that same sort of configuration file in Unreal. So the way I did it is editor utility widget menu. You can name it whatever you like. The other thing that we're going to do as a meta specifier is going to be a tooltip. So what we can do here, and for all of these, you have to be inside this parentheses. You'll go tooltip, and it's the same sort of thing. We can say that this is our configuration, or custom menu configuration. Custom menu configuration for project editor utility widgets. There we go. And you can, again, name this whatever you like, whatever you feel you're comfortable with. And this is sort of the first thing that we want to do. Why don't we compile this and see what it gives us? And then we can start exploring the sort of uDeveloper settings class and seeing if there's anything there that we need to do. Spoilers, at the moment we don't, but you need to know before you're sure. So let's build it and see what it does. Before I build, I just want to let you know that we don't actually need a C++ file for this at the moment, and so we won't need this to compile the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this one because we don't need it. All we need is the header file. So let's build it and see what happens. We've run into our first issue. We have some sort of compilation error. But we are programmers and we do not shy away from errors. We look into the errors and we understand what they are saying. And we have an unresolved external symbol. So the compiler is telling us that it does not know what something is. It cannot figure it out. And what it's trying to tell me is that a uDeveloper settings, it doesn't really know what that is. So it's saying, hey, uDeveloper settings is referenced in a function. I don't really know what that is. And usually when that is the case, that means that this lives somewhere specific and we need to include it into our build.cs file. So in Writer, we can middle click it and find out where it lives by going into it and hovering in. And you'll see it's kind of cut off here, unfortunately, but you can kind of see that it's saying it lives in engine, source, runtime, developer, settings. I know it's hard to see there, but what I can do is I can close these two, and there you go. So you can see that this lives in runtime developer settings. What I need to do is come into my build.cs and we need to add developer settings, like so. Yep, if it lets me do that. Okay, developer settings, like so. Once we do this, it should resolve that external symbol because we are telling it to include that module. And we can try and compile again. And let's see if we have a successful compilation this time. But very importantly, we shouldn't have this here in the custom menu as in the main build.cs. We need to have the build.cs of our submodule, our editor module, be the one that actually has that dependency. So what we will do is in the private dependency, add the developer settings here. And that should clear the error for us. So if I clear the console now and I try and run it, we should have a successful compilation. I put it in the main submodule, which is the main project, and that's not going to work. It needs to be within this scope of this submodule here. So if that makes sense, if you ever get some sort of unresolved external symbol when you're trying to work with C++, that usually means that the class you're trying to subclass from or use lives in a module that you have not added into your build.cs as a dependency. As you can see, we now have a successful compilation and we can get going. Now, the previous tutorial was very sort of step-by-step, here's what we do, etc. What I'd like this one to be is an exploration of the process and a step-by-step guide of, oh, we've hit a problem. How do we solve this problem? This is a very important process for you to go through if you are a newer programmer, and even if you're experienced and not super familiar with Unreal. I'm hoping that this will help kind of guide you and make it so that it's easy for you to kind of implement these tools for yourself on how to solve problems. And so the project is open and the project settings opened immediately. If we scroll down, we can find our editor utility widget menu. And it's completely empty, which makes total sense because our class is completely empty. There is literally nothing in it. Cool, but we've built it. It's there. It exists. It's an entry. That's great. Let's move on and let's understand how we can actually make that menu setting or these global configurations, let's call them, more useful to us. So we need to start thinking about what we want from this. So the first thing to do when you're working with a class that you don't know much about, and this is the best piece of advice I was ever given when I started to learn C++, is to just go in it and see what's inside. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to middle click and we're going to have a look at this class. And what we can see by having a look at the uDeveloper settings class is that it is a fairly simple class with not many things that we need to do, or actually nothing at all to have it working. It inherits from uObject, which makes complete sense, as most things will do when it comes to Unreal. And when I don't know of a class, I have never used it before, I tend to want to look at the basic things of the class, the constructor, and what kind of properties do I have that I might need to modify. In this particular instance, the properties that we have are the category name and the section name. But if you look on the section name here, if not filled in, will be the F name of the class. That works for me because my class will just be called editor utility menu settings. I'm fine with that. And for the category name, it will be looking at the specifier that we put in on configuration. So the category will be editor. And I'm also absolutely fine with that. You could obviously make your own category, and then it would separate your INI from that sort of main editor section, and you might want to do that. In my case, there isn't anything here that I need, and because I don't want to set any defaults, I don't need to run the constructor, which means I don't need the CPP file, which is usually how you do things. That being said, what do we want to do with uDeveloper settings? Nothing default is basically what I'm trying to tell you. And so we now need to decide how it is that we want to structure our tool. And what I want is for the user to be able to, first of all, have, and I'm going to use specific colors because they make sense, I want them to have an option to add their editor utility widget. So this is what it's going to be, editor utility widget. So I'm going to need somehow to point to a path that represents an editor utility widget. I also want them to have a name for that tool, right? That's going to be important because we could try and derive it from the name, but usually you'll have some sort of naming convention, right? Like EUW something, whatever. We don't want that. We don't want to be trying to split a string or whatever, convert an F name to a string to split it. Like, we don't need to do that. So what I'd like to do is to give the user a couple of options. The first option being, what is the tool name, right? So tool name, and we want to give a tooltip. Right, so these are things that I want in my settings. That's important to me for organizational purposes and just so it's clean in general. But we kind of have a bit of a sort of inception of code here, because if we think about our menu, we have our sort of, let's use this black bar. This is our main menu bar here. We're going to click it. It's going to open up a menu, right? Inside that menu, I need an entry that's going to house these guys or gals. And in this particular instance, it would be here. But then when I go over it, then it should show me our actual tool list, like, because we're going to have multiple tools. So we're going to have, tool 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the other thing that I need is to kind of wrap this in a sort of category, which is, say, editor utility widgets or something like that. Like, this needs to be editor utility widgets or something like that. And I also would like a tooltip for the category so that folks know what it is. So I need a couple of things in order to kind of build this little structure. This is all relevant to the widget. So the widget needs, we're talking this section here. Well, which I should probably use a different color to explain. So this section here is going to populate this information. And so when I click it, I want this to get triggered, and the name and tooltip are going to just be in here. That's the idea. Okay, cool. So we need to build that, and well, it's relatively simple for us to think about it. If you're an experienced programmer or not, if not, we can get going, but hopefully you kind of get the gist of it. We can just make some properties. So I'm going to make a public EU property, and we have some specifiers to do. It is a config because it writes to an INI. I would like to edit defaults only. and I'd like to make a blueprint read-only. And the category is tool data. That's basically what I'm going to call it, so that it kind of gets organized in the right way. And I just want an F name, and we're going to call it category. That's it. And I need the same thing again, but I want it to be category tooltip. So there we are. So we're sort of trucking here. And now I need to figure out like how I'm going to place my widgets, because if you think about what I'm doing is I've built this section here. Here's my menu once it's been opened, right? So we've opened the menu. This is sort of like the main button. What I'm saying is that I'm populating the name or the category, and then when I hover over the tooltip, that will appear here. So these are those two that I'm doing, right? So if I pop this color here, that's what I'm doing there. So now we need within this widget to open another widget, but in this case, it's going to have a list of things inside it. And when you think about a list of things, we are talking about an array of things. So I need an array of widgets or editor utility widget entries. The way that I want to do this is with a struct, because those widgets needs to have their names as well, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to delete this part here just because I'm not going to write any specific documentation, but what we need is a use struct, and it's done this here for us. So I'm going to do a blueprint type so that we can build structs of this type with blueprints should we need to, and which we might not need to, but I will leave that as a option. We're going to make a few properties. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to do edit anywhere, because I want people to be able to edit this, and I don't need blueprint read and write. Thank you very much, writer. And the main thing here is that I want to have the widget. So the widget is going to be a fsoft object path, and instead of it being called object path, it's going to be editor utility widget path, for example. And I'd like for you to not be able to put anything in here that isn't an editor utility widget. And we'll discuss what a soft object path is in a moment. So we have a meta specifier that we can do, which is allow classes. Writer is really good because it gives you an idea of what the specifiers do. And it says here, indicates the types of assets. So we're basically filtering to be a specific type. Now, I don't expect you to know what kind of a thing we want. And what I want is, in this case here, because I've had to look it up, a script blutility, because it used to be called a blutility before it was an editor utility widget. Editor utility widget blueprint. That's what we allow in there. And so you literally can't add anything else to this config unless exactly what we want, which is a really good way of reducing user error or any kind of problem. If you're building a tool, you need to bulletproof your tool, and that's exactly what we're doing. And so as far as the order of things go, not that this necessarily is going to matter too much for us. I'm now going to make another U property, and that is not what I wanted. There we go. We're going to make an config because I want this to write to the INI, and I want it to be edit defaults only. And I'm going to say this is blueprint read only. And what else do we need? We can just add it to the same category, which is, in this particular instance, what we're using is tool data. That's it. I think that will work fine. And if the things that we need is an ftext, and this will be, or I guess, yeah, I'll see if it needs to be an ftext or an fstring. We can decide this in a moment. We're going to call this the widget label. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to call this an ftext as well, and it will be the widget tooltip. And that's basically what we want. And now we've kind of created our sort of, if you have a main menu with a sub menu, we're kind of creating this now, this sort of list, like what are these doing, right? So if I click the activity monitor, it pops the activity monitor, etc. Right? So it's effectively mimicking this window here. So within here, we have the activity monitor. I guess it doesn't have a tooltip, but we've just created the label and the tooltip. So if it did have it, that's what we're doing. I need an array of these in here. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So should be fairly straightforward. I'm going to do config as well. Instead of edit defaults only, I'm going to do edit anywhere. And we will do a T array. And we will do F. What did we call it? We called it myStruct, which isn't very helpful at all. We're going to call it F widget entry. And we want an array of F widget entries. And we're just going to call it editor widget widget menu items. And there we are. This is the sort of structure and backbone of our tool. How is this going to work? Well, I can tell you right off the bat that it might not compile depending on the circumstances. I think it will, but I know we're missing a few things to make this work. But let's see what happens. At least for now, Writer hasn't told me that I don't have anything. There's no red anything, and our build has succeeded. So we're good to go. And now we get to see the fruits of our labor. If I open up the project settings, we can go find the editor section, which is, remember, the category. And now we have this. So the category, what do we want here? What do we want the tooltip? And this will just be, we're just going to call it editor utility widgets. And the tooltip is our project tools. Oh, easy access to our project tools. And you can say something like, this list can be modified in the default engine or default editor .ini, and we do a little arrow saying editor utility widget menu, for example. Nice little bit of documentation for folks. And if we create new array elements, suddenly we have our nice little struct that is looking for editor utility widgets, which I think I don't have any of. So it's a soft object path. And in this particular instance, do we not have any editor utility widgets? I guess not. Yeah. And if we don't show engine content, there we go. This is the only thing it can find, which isn't really anything. Cool. So we've successfully built our options here. Let's very quickly build a editor utility widget and see if things work. So if I go into content, there is nothing here. I'm going to go ahead and do editor utility widgets, and I'm just going to create an editor utility widget. So if we go editor utilities, editor utility widget, or it can be an editor utility blueprint as well. So we need to kind of be mindful of that. So if we want to allow that, we need to maybe modify our specifier. So we'll try, in this particular instance, we'll just try a widget, and I'll just say it's a stack box. I don't mind. And we go EUW for editor utility widget, custom tool 1. There we go. And what will it do? It'll do absolutely nothing. I'll just have a button or something like that. So we'll do a button like so. And we'll just fill the button like so. And that's fine. And we could, as it's a stack box, we can make the stack box vertical if we like. And then, the buttons are sort of where they are. And we could just leave it as auto. And now we've got like 2 buttons and we can just add like 5 of padding, and then they'll space each other out or something like that. Cool. This works. We have 2 buttons. They won't do anything, but that's it. And obviously we can do things to the buttons. This isn't really a UI tutorial or anything like that. So if you did want to add text to your buttons, you can just parent a text widget into the buttons like so. And I can just say that this is option 1 or something like that, and option 2. And we'll leave it there. We don't need to go any deeper than that, as this is just for demonstration purposes. We now have an editor utility widget, and I want to double check if I've done everything right. So if we open up our project settings, find our menu, open it up, it shows up as an option for us. Wonderful. The widget label is going to be a custom tool 1, and this is tooltip for custom tool 1. We're done. And by the way, as you type this out, because you're effectively modifying a text file, it's getting updated in real time. I'll sort of try and catch this here. So if I call this custom tool 50, and I don't know, custom tool 100 here on the thing, it should be modifying it. See, as soon as I clicked it, it showed up. So that's what's happening here. I don't want there to be any question of what's happening in the background, just so you know that is what's happening, right? So we're modifying this, but it's actually modifying all of this text here as kind of like I showed you before. And if you want to see things a little bit clearer, I do recommend that you download something like Notepad++, because then it will actually structure things nicely, and you can kind of see colors and, you know, syntax highlighting, that kind of thing. So just so you can kind of get what we're doing, you see tooltip for custom 1, you can see what we're doing there. Lovely. So I said that I would talk about a soft object path. And what you have to understand is that this is going to be dealing with potentially tools that are using textures, assets. You don't know what's going to be in here. I don't want this to be immediately loaded into memory until I'm ready. I don't want any problems with that. And so using a soft object path is the best thing to do. And that is the best practice for something like this. You want to only load it when you need to, because you could build a custom INI like I have in the past to have levels in them as a way to sort of filter things. And if you had the whole level there as the actual level in the options, well, that would be a bad time. So using soft object references means that all we have here is literally a path, which you can see here is game editor utility widgets, EUW custom tool 1. Okay, so we need to move on now. We need to start kind of putting things together. We've done this now. We know exactly what we have, and what we could do is say just duplicate this a couple of times, and now we have tool 2 and tool 3, which is great. And what we can do is in the project settings, we can just add those at any time. And you can see how easy this is going to be now for someone to maintain this menu that we're going to build. So we can get custom tool 2, we can get custom tool 3, and I'll just kind of copy all of this stuff, and I'll just modify what this does. So this is 3, 3, 2, 2. Now we need to get into the nitty-gritty stuff, which is you're kind of bored. You've probably, you know, you're rolling your eyes of like, okay, we've done the developer settings. What else do we do? Now we need to figure out how do we add this sort of submenu thing. Well, good news is if we've done it before, we just need to understand how is it that I can get all of this sort of information? Like, how do I get this array and the items within that array so that I can launch my editor utilities? Let's find out. So the main thing that we want is to make a new menu, right? Like we just want a new submenu. And if you look at the pattern that I've used is obviously on the startup of the module, we have this add menu function, which is this one down here. And you can see the first thing that it does, it says add the pull down menu. And then it says within that, we create this new object, we create raw, and then we call this function fill menu, which is this right here. So I don't need this anymore because this is just sort of something I left as reference really, so that from the previous tutorial you could figure out what it is that you wanted. So we don't really need this anymore, which means I am going to delete it. One of the things I'd like to show you is I built this little sort of tooltip here that says hard edge, as in if you wanted to separate tools or options or things like that based off of, say, environment art, character art, you know, tech anim or animation, you know, level design, whatever it is that you would want to do, maybe profiling or optimization, what we can do is we can do these sections and it will help us like separate things. And that's what I'd like to show you how to build today on top of everything else. So what we will do is, if you'll recall, we need to do things with the menu builder reference that we have. We can go menu builder. And there is a cool thing, which is the third option here, which is called begin section. And you can see here, it takes in an extension hook and a bit of text and all kinds of stuff. But everything here, apart from the extension hook, if you look, has a default value. You can see the heading text is equal to f text, it's empty, then you've got visibility equal to something. So actually we don't need to set any parameters here really, apart from the name, which in my case, I'm going to do name none. Okay. And then the extension hook, as in the heading text and etc., I want to actually, you know, do something about it. So I'm going to say, because this is a menu, I'm going to say this is localized text, like so. And we're just going to go that this is our hard edge heading. And the name of that section, which is what you saw in the example, is going to be hard edge, like so. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So that's going to create that little bar with the dash that you saw, or that dash with the name. So it's basically going to kind of become this that you saw, right? Which is cool. So we're just giving the little section a heading name, and it's something that we want. Now, what you do with this section is you actually put things inside it, and that's where you can do different things. So I'm going to leave these outside so that you can kind of see the difference, and we can go from there. So in here, what we want to do is add our sort of editor utility menu. I want to do that inside of a function. So this is where I want to add a submenu for utility widgets, right? So we're going to go back to the header file, and what we're going to do is we're going to basically recreate what we do with fill menu, which is this here, and we're just going to say that this is our add editor utility submenu, like so. And it will take a menu builder for us to be able to add submenus and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to Alt-Enter to get into the options and generate a definition, and there is our function ready to go. So if we scroll all the way back up here to our fill menu, one of the things that you can do is menu builder, oh look, end section. And that's what you want to do. So you begin a section and you end a section. You begin a section, add stuff inside it, and then you go from there. So that's how we're going to have our organization set up. Now comes the sort of hard part. We need to call that function, which is going to go and what we're going to call add editor utility submenu. We pass in the menu builder, and now we have to work on our function. And we have to understand, how do we interact with this settings? How do we interact with this INI? Luckily for us, it's fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it. And what you need to do is you need to get the default object. And we can do this by saying get default, which means we're basically getting the INI file itself. And the cool thing is that this is a templated function, which means we can specifically say we want an editor utility menu settings. That's what we're going to get. So we do this, but obviously by getting it, we will get the actual object. We'll get a pointer to it. So we are not going to modify this. We're just going to access it. So it's going to be a const editor utility menu settings. It always does this, doesn't it? Editor utility menu settings pointer, and we're just going to call it the widget settings, and that is equal to. So effectively we're saying, hey, give me all the INI data. Give me this class. Like, how is this class structured? Give it to me. Give me like what this object is. So it's basically saying, grab me this. I want to know what this is. Cool. So we'll grab a pointer to that. And now we have access to things that are inside it that we've exposed. In our particular instance and case, we have some public variables or properties, as it were, and these are things like the category, the tooltip, and the widgets that we would like. Perfect. So let's continue. And inside of this functionality to add the editor utility, we need to do a few things. The first thing that we need to do, as is very common in C++, and if you're new to doing C++, you have to be super careful about things being valid or null pointers. So we're going to go if not widget settings, which would be bad, and also if the widget settings, if our array is empty, which is our editor widget menu items, dot number, well, there you go, writer's helping me, is equal to 0, we basically return. And if you didn't know, you can return without the brackets in C++ if it's a single line. If you want to do that or not, that is up to you. Some folks will say, no, put the brackets in, otherwise I'm unhappy. Other people will say, you know what, it's cleaner, just do this, it's fine. Completely up to you. I'm actually of the school of thought that I think that looks quite nice, so I'm going to keep that. You can flame me if you want in the comments, but for this kind of stuff, I like it. So we've established that our settings are valid, which means we're bulletproofing the tools. Yet again, we're saying, hey, we're not allowing things to be empty. No empty widgets, no bad tooltips, no nothing like that. We can not have tooltips and we cannot have names, but you know, if there's no widgets, don't do anything, right? Like, so if there's at least widgets, we can start building, which is good. Now, before I continue, I want to rectify a small issue, which is I ended up making our menu settings in the internal parts of it f names, and actually I'd want those to be f texts because those are already localized. So just a small little change that we're going to do. And now we want to do menu builder, and we want to add a submenu. The submenu will take 2 f texts, right? So if we look on this, it will ask for a menu label and a menu tooltip, which is exactly what we've just converted to text. So we go widget settings, and we go category, and we go widget settings, and we go category tooltip. Perfect. What else do we do? Well, at this point, we need our lambda function. So we do f new menu delegate. It'll do this whole thing. I don't want a create raw though. I want a create lambda. So I'm not sure if it's going to do that. So I'll do f new menu delegate, and I'll just do create lambda. And it didn't do create lambda. There we go. I'll just click create lambda, and then it'll do the thing for us. Now it's going to ask us for the capture that we want to do for our lambda, and for that we would like to capture the widget settings because we want to operate on the widget settings inside the lambda, and it's getting a little bit crowded in here, which I think you will agree with. And so here's our lambda termination point, and we just need to open up the lambda there, and there we go. And it's always gets me with the lambdas. I did it slightly wrong. It's in here. That's the lambda there. So there we go. And then it's always kind of tricky to kind of know how many parentheses you're missing. We are missing the arguments, which will be the f menu builder, sub menu builder, which is exactly what we want. So now we have that there for our lambda function. So we've captured the widget settings. We've done the menu builder. We've opened up the function here, which is good news. And now we need to kind of close all of this off. So why don't we do this? And now we can end the line properly. There we go. Our lambda is built. And in here is where we do the magic. This will be the most important part of the code. This is what will do all the heavy lifting. We are already calling the functionality here. So that's basically where everything will happen. So we'll just do this and tidy all that up. Cool. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to build a menu entry for every item inside the widget settings, which is this editor widget menu items. So we need to loop through this array, and for every item in the array, we need to access things from that array and then populate our menu programmatically. This is the juicy part. We're going to use a ranged-based for loop. So it'll be for, and we're not going to modify anything here. So it is a const f widget entry, which is our struct that we built. And you can see here, writer is being very useful. I can just hit tab, and that's exactly what I want. I want to loop through the widget settings, editor widget menu items. Inside this loop, we need to check a few things. So what we're going to do here is we need to check a few things. The first thing we need to do is we need to check if the widget can be loaded from the string. And for that, we're going to do uObjectPointer. uObjectPointer. We're going to call this the loaded widget. And we're going to say that this is equal to the widget entry. And we're going to say this is the editor utility widget path. We're going to say try load. That's important. So we need to try and load it. And if it's not successful, what we need to do is basically just give it a bit of a warning. And we need to say, hey, UE log. And we'll use the fact that we have a log that we've already built. So it's the log edge editor. And we're just going to say warning. And we're going to say text. And what do we say? Failed to load object. And we can, for example, we could try and, or say we say failed to load widget entry. And we'll just do a few exclamation marks. Something like that I think should be good. And we should continue the loop iteration and break out of it. So now that we have this, we're in a better place. Now we have the loaded object. We need to cast it to our editor utility widget blueprint. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to wrap, so we're going to do editor utility widget blueprint. And I need to caveat this to say that this will be our editor utility widget. I've done this code a few times before so that the recording can run smoothly. You will need in your editor build.cs to add blutility as a dependency. Otherwise, it won't recognize this type to be anything. And also, you'll need to include this header file so that it knows what it is that it's doing. Okay, that's important. So make sure you've got this going in here. You'll also need the editor utility subsystem, but we'll get to that in a second. So I can erase that for now. Okay, so back to where we were. We need to effectively cast. So we're going to cast to the editor utility widget blueprint. Thank you, writer, for speeding us up. And now we need to do kind of the same thing. You know, we need to kind of continue to do early exits until we don't have a problem. Now, we need to add a menu entry to this submenu. That's the main thing that we want to do. But in order to do that, we've got to create the FUI action, because when we click something, something needs to happen. So we've got to do the same thing we've done here and sort of create a lambda, right? So that's the important part for us. So we're going to, in here, say FUI action, create lambda, and inside this lambda, we do need to capture the editor widget utility, because we're going to use it. We are not going to do a log or anything like that. I can do this just to keep things a bit cleaner. And also, that's a little bit of a weird, if I do say so myself, tabbing in of things. So inside this create lambda, we've got to basically spawn and register a tab. In order to do this, we're going to do uEditor, what was it? The utility subsystem. So we need the editor utility subsystem. So we need uEditor utility subsystem. In order to get this, it's a pointer, so we're going to call it the editor utility subsystem. That is equal to the gEditor, so we're going to get it from the editor. We're going to do gets editor subsystem. There you go. Thanks, Ryder. You're very helpful. So this is what we need. We need the editor subsystem, and then within it, we need to go editor utility subsystem. We're going to spawn and register a tab. This tab is going to be our editor utility widget, like so. And that is our Lambda function that we need to build. And depending on what it is that we want to do, because it is inside our fcons UI action, yeah. I mean, because this is a single line, I know some people are probably going to complain. I'm just going to do this so it looks a little bit cleaner. Oops. So we'll do this. And I think that looks a little bit better and a little bit cleaner, so we know what's going on here. Maybe that doesn't look cleaner, but yeah. Anyway, so we're going to spawn and register a tab. This is important so that, you know, it'll show up for our menu as we're sort of used to. And if you want to see what this function is doing, which is the best way to kind of understand what anything is, you can see that it is basically taking in a editor utility blueprint, takes and generates a sort of tab ID, and then registers it. So basically that menu tab, you know, as if we're building something like this, it's giving it an ID. That's important. So we're registering it with the editor utility subsystem. Okay. Once we're out of this Lambda function while still in the loop, this is very important. We are still in the loop here. We need to then do submenu builder. Add menu entry. Add menu entry. What is the menu entry? Well, it is the widget entry. And this will be the widget label. And then we do widget entry. And we do widget tooltip. That's important. And also what we need to do is if you have an icon, you do an fslate icon. Like so. And finally, we need an action, which should be our actual Lambda. So this UI action here is actually what we need. And this one here, we're going to call create widget. And it is a const actually. So we can do this. It's a const FUI action. It's called create widget. And we're going to paste it in here. And that should be it. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking, what in God's name is going on, right? Up until here, it probably makes sense. We are looping through the widget entries. If they're not valid, we will just say, hey, failed to load widget entry. We could make a better error message. We don't have time for that right now. So this is all fine. We then check if the widget is of the right type. It should be. There's no other way for it not to be, but we're still being safe and checking. If not, we continue. And then we're sort of creating this UI action, which is the clicking effectively, right? And when we click it, we're going to leverage the editor utility subsystem. Now, this is the thing. We're trying to work with editor utilities. So the editor utility subsystem is what we need to use. And the function we want is the spawn and register tab. This is important because if we look at this function, it creates this tab ID, and then it says spawn and register tab and get ID, which is right here. What does it do? It registers the tab, gets the ID, which is up here. So you see, and then what it does, it has this find utility widget from Blueprint, as you can see. And what does this function do? this function do, what this function does, Jesus, my English is gone, is checks if the blueprint is valid, and then it can tell you if it found it as an invalid, and that may not do anything here. And then it goes, hey, create the widget, get created widget. So then once you do that, it will give you sort of the button to press and go from there. So when it finds that widget, it's effectively giving you the option to do the right click run. Because we have the widget, when we click it, we're basically opening it as if we are basically saying, hey, open the layers window. That's effectively, we have the thing where we want to open it. That's what the code is doing. Okay, shall we check if everything's okay and it works? I will try now to compile this, and we will see what happens. Don't forget, like I said before, make sure that your build.cs has the blutility and that the Edge Editor CPP, your submodule, has the right includes. Now we've had an issue, and it's saying that inside the editor utility widget blueprint header file that we've just included, it can't open. It doesn't know where this is, this widget blueprint.h. Oh dear. So we need to kind of find this now, because we're programmers, we look at errors, we see what's going on. So inside the editor utility widget file, which we can find through here. So if we go into here, editor utility widget blueprint, it's saying that line 19 is our issue inside the includes, which is this person here. So how do we find this widget blueprint? Well, it'll be this guy here. So this person lives inside where? Where does this live? Lives inside UMG editor widget blueprint. So maybe you can't quite read that. Well, you can't actually, but I promise you it's saying UMG editor. So we need to add that in because it cannot find it. Now let's try and build it and see if it's happier. It is not happy because it's now saying that we don't know where the G editor is. And I'm just going to save you some time and say that this is the Unreal Ed. And we're going to run it again. As I said, this is a very advanced tutorial. I'm hoping that you're following along. I know it takes a while, but I want to take you through the thought process and how to make the code actually work. We have a successful build. And I think, if I dare say, we are done. And with this little bit of code here, that took a while to explain. I know it's not a lot of code, but it's complicated, so I want to make sure that you know what you're building so that you can build it yourself and expand upon it and modify it and go from there. So here we are. The project is open. The moment of truth is here. You'll see here that we have the hard edge section. Our editor utility widgets have appeared, custom tool 1, 2, and 3. And if we click them, they appear. And they all do what we expect them to do. Most importantly, if we hover over, we see the tooltips and all the widgets. To recap, what we've done here is we've leveraged a uDeveloper settings file or class, which is our widget menu settings. In here, we have created a struct, which basically denotes a label and a tooltip and what the widget tool we want to use is as a soft object path. We then populate that INI file with a name for the category and the tooltip, and an array of those widgets. What that looks like is in the project settings, over here, all the way into the editor INI, right there. We have effectively transformed this into a modular, programmatically created menu by leveraging our submodule and our previous knowledge. Hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial and you've been able to follow along and learn something. I tried to demystify the C++ code as we build it so that you don't feel lost, even if you're a bit of a beginner. If you are a beginner, take your time and try and understand all of the things that we've done by creating the lambdas, understanding what the capture options are, plus arguments. This is a bit complicated. We have a lambda that has a lambda inside it. It is a very advanced bit of code, in my opinion. But we're using good patterns, we're doing early exits, and in general, this will be pretty good, easy to maintain code that won't fail silently if there is an issue. There's always improvements to be made, but for now, I'll leave you with this. There will be links in the description to a GitHub, and there will be the code itself pasted into the page of this tutorial where you're watching this. And all of this information is free for you to use. I hope it's useful for you and your project, whatever it is that you're doing. Take care and happy pipelining.